Have you been so ashamed of a medical condition they had that they decided to ignore it / not see a doctor? Well, here's my story. When I was around 21 it started. If I ate fish, I would smell of fish from my vajayjay. It doesn't wash away. It fades slightly and comes right back and lasts a few days. Now I quickly figured out there was a direct link. You could even smell what fish I had. I had comments from friends and family, things like, "Oh, have you had lemon sole for lunch?" I absolutely love that one from Lidl. Yes, I did. 2 days ago. It's quite an embarrassing situation. Nobody wants a fishy fanny. So I stopped eating fish. At a doctor's appointment I was asked about my diet. How often do I drink? Smoke? How many portions of fruit and veg daily? Eggs? Meat and fish? So I tell her why I don't eat fish. She looked at me like I was completely crazy. You have bacterial vaginosis, nothing to do with eating fish, but it only happens when I eat fish, and you can smell exactly which fish I ate. She looked even more like she was talking to a lunatic. Right. Come in again when it happens and we will swab you. So I went home, ate fish, rebooked on an appointment. I was swabbed. There is quite an odor. It's definitely BV, but a swab will confirm it for you. The results were negative. It was ignored that it was negative. Never spoken about again. I'd vaguely mentioned it to a few other doctors over the years. The same year a crazy look came from their faces, but no further action. Then I got pregnant with my eldest at 29 and I had to see a dietitian as I had gestational diabetes. Again, questions about my diet. Fruit and veg? Meat? Fish? I avoid fish. It makes my vaginal fluid smell of fish. That isn't a thing. I need you to eat a minimum of 2 portions of fish a week for your baby's brain development. With lots of medical professionals sticking their heads and hands up and around my hoo-ha, I didn't want to smell of fish from several meters away, so I declined and ate more eggs instead. But I did go home and research it. After some research I discovered I wasn't alone. There is an entire forum of us, mainly women, but there are men who get it too, the smell coming from sweaty areas. Doctors also either ignored them, diagnosed bacterial vaginosis or STIs if they did listen, or like me were given a look like they were insane. After digging through hundreds of comments I had an answer. Trimethylaminoria, TMAU, aka fish odor syndrome. Many people actually smell like garbage with it. It's caused by not being able to process some proteins, so it releases them in sweat and other fluids. There is no current cure, but the group had managed to discover through their own experiments that drinking strong lemon drinks, real lemons, not an artificial flavoring, taking cranberry tablets 30 to 60 minutes before eating fish, or whilst you're on antibiotics. Obviously it's not advised to live on antibiotics though, so you can eat fish. But I finally had answers. It had a name. People understood. And doctors had been no help at all. They made medical care unapproachable. Felt shame for even mentioning it. Accidentally burned down my neighbor's fence and she tries to milk me for $10,000. Judge humbles that ass up real quick. So it's been about 4 years since this happened. I was about 18 at the time, working for a security company. There were constant call-offs and no-shows, have no idea why. But being so young and naive, I was constantly working 16-hour shifts and not coming home until 8 a.m. Also I lived with my father at the time. The time frame of this was around the 4th of July. I finally had a day off and my best friend was back in town for vacation. We decided to get together and chip in on some good old American fireworks. To be fair, I have had nothing but bad experiences with fireworks, so I had no idea how this would be any different. We got home with the fireworks and we laid them all out on the floor. Sparklers, bottle rockets, cakes, and Roman candles. I say, why don't we mess around with some sparklers since it's still not dark yet? Great idea. We go into my backyard, where it hasn't rained in well over 2 months and it is extremely dry. You see the problem here? One of the little sparkies from mine and my friend's sparkler made contact with the ground and made 2 small fires that quickly spread to a large area. I ran as fast as I could to grab the garden hose and quickly started spraying down the fire. It was no use, it was spreading faster than I could spray it. I handed my friend the hose and called 911. What felt like hours was only 4 minutes and the fire was spreading to the neighbor's fence. The neighbor came outside and they were fairly calm to grab their hose and spray down the fence, along with the dead grass in her yard. The fire department shows up finally and I tell my friend only one of us needs to get in trouble. You should leave. He was reluctant to leave because he felt equally responsible, but I convinced him. I didn't want him to get in trouble and have to drop out of college. My neighbor was super chill about the entire situation at first. I told her that we could talk about replacing the fence and get some quotes to repair it. She was just super grateful that everyone was okay. About 2 hours after the fire, the arson/fire investigator came to question me about the fire. I told him the truth. I said I was in the backyard by myself playing with fireworks and accidentally lit the ground on fire. I had gotten off that day without being hit by any charges and was commended for being honest. Here is where it goes downhill very fast. About a week later I get a knock on the door from the neighbor. I opened the door and she handed me 2 pieces of paper for me to look at. There was a quote for the fence valued at around $4,000 and an estimate for lawn care valued around $6,000. These were really shady and just typed out on a Microsoft Word document. No logo or company name. She then adds, I will also be having you pay my water bill for 3 months because the new yard will need lots of water. Now the fence this woman had before was raggedy and falling apart. Her yard? Dead grass, zazas everywhere, never mowed it. Now looking at this paper she wants a mahogany fence, and a brand new backyard with flowers and trimmed hedges? I said I need to get an estimate myself. This doesn't feel right. She says, remember you agreed to replace my fence, and a real man keeps promises. I shut the door and called my dad to tell him about what just happened. He flipped the flock out and told me, son, don't you give that slut a single dime. He gives me the number to his handyman and tells me to take care of it. The next day I had the guy come out for an estimate, and the neighbor ran outside flailing her arms. "I did not give you permission to get an estimate on my fence. Technically it separates the property line, so it's both of our fences." She calls the cops on me for having a contractor, and they ultimately can't do a single thing because I'm on my property. He quickly finishes the estimate off at $1,200. I also knew a guy who did lawn care, from my time working at the grocery store. He estimated the lawn reseeding while she was away from the house to be about $800. After I get these estimates I give copies to the woman and she is having none of it. "I don't know these people, I don't want them near my house. They're probably really shitty contractors." I said, "No, I know them personally, they are really nice people and do great work." She shut the door in my face and I went on my way. I ended up working a 16-hour shift that night and got home at 8 a.m. And this woman comes knocking on my door at 9 a.m. and demanded I speak to her. I explained, "I would really love to do this, but I just got home and I have to be back at work in less than 5 hours. I need to sleep." She goes, "What kind of lazy asshat sleeps in until 2 p.m. At this point I had about lost it, and told her, "You can either accept my $2,000 for my quotes or kiss my ass and get nothing." She stood there for a while with her mouth gaped open, but she accepted my offer and planned to meet down at the notary the next morning. I spent that night after I got off work, writing a contract and gathering the $2,000 in cash. The next morning I wake up, and grab this contract to meet down at the notary. I was thrilled to finally be done with this broad, and never speak to her again. I waited for her for over 3 hours and she didn't show up. I get a call from her saying, "I'm sorry, the $2,000 isn't enough. I'm having my guys start work on this project, and you will be paying me full price." "Oh really?" After that I did not say a single word to her, and I watched for a few months as these guys turned her backyard into an oasis, complete with a small pond, brand new sod and flowers, the whole 9 yards. Come to find out she had plans to remodel these things for a long time, and was just waiting for the opportunity to go through with it. Also in this time, she used her remodel funds to go on a trip to Hawaii. You know how I found out about this? She was bragging about it on the neighborhood Facebook group, and didn't know I was in it. I have a different Facebook name than my real name. Are you ready for the revenge? Now 4 months after the fire and all the remodels, I get served papers to go to court for $10,300. At 18 years old I'm having to hire a lawyer to work my case. When we finally do get into court I lay everything out. The quotes: being harassed multiple times, not showing up after agreeing to a deal, not wanting me to get my own quotes, required by law BTW, and her bragging about screwing me out of money, and I have proof of all of this. The judge looked at her and said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're out of your daggum mind. Not only did this young man tell the truth of what happened, he offered to pay you more than he was supposed to. Your lawn was already dead before the fire occurred, therefore he is only responsible for the fence of $1,200. I will also deduct from this his lawyer fees, $800. So I burned this woman's fence down and all I'm having to give her is $400? Cool." She took a huge financial loss from this, not sure how much the Hawaii trip cost her, but she was in serious debt. She ended up having to sell the house because of it and moved into a smaller house. Haven't heard anything from her since. What was something small you went to the doctor for that turned out to be very significant? When I was a little boy of about 10 years old, I told my mother that I thought I needed a new prescription for my glasses. I told her I was having difficulty seeing the blackboard in class at school. This was 1963 and I was living with my family in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So my mother, thinking it was going to be a routine checkup, took me to the local ophthalmologist who always checked my vision. At that point I thought that I was simply going to walk out with a new prescription and life would go on. My ophthalmologist was a wonderful old gentleman who was a very careful and very thoughtful doctor. He was the kind of person with whom you could really trust and feel comfortable. Even now I can vividly picture him in the examination room, as that intensely bright light, that has occurred hundreds of times throughout my life, came close to my dilated eyes. After examining my eyes he turned to me, my mother was in the waiting room, and said that I was going blind in my left eye. He told me I had a detached retina and that I needed surgery immediately. Ironically, what he told me next was actually more impactful than being told that I was going blind in my left eye. He told me that I would never ever be able to play football again. When I heard that, I bolted out of the exam room, ran through the waiting room out the front door and sat down on the sidewalk outside his office weeping. My mother, shocked at my actions, thought, "What in the world is going on?" After collecting me from outside she immediately went to the doctor and he told her that I needed to go to the medical college in Charleston, South Carolina and have emergency surgery. That day we got in the car and drove over 100 miles to Charleston to the medical college and arrived at the department where the top eye surgeons examined me. They told my parents that I was not going blind in just one eye, I was going blind in both eyes. They then informed us that they were not capable of doing the surgery because of the extent of the retinal damage. They recommended that we travel to Johns Hopkins in Maryland, the only place at that time capable of performing the kind of surgery I needed. Suffice it to say, the head of ophthalmology at Johns Hopkins took my case and did the surgery. I found out later that the members of the Presbyterian church that my family attended also prayed all that day for a successful surgery. 10 hours later the surgery was over and was a huge success. Ever since I have thanked God not only for my original doctor who detected my problem but also for all of the amazing medical professionals who were instrumental in my treatment. One final caveat. The wonderful doctor who first discovered my condition knew that I had to have surgery on both eyes. Apparently, as I found out later, he didn't have the heart to tell me that my condition was so dire.